Senator Eagleton, I guess the question everybody wants to hear you answer this morning is, are you going to stay on as the Democratic vice presidential candidate, or are you going to retire?
I intend to stay on. I think I'll be an asset to the ticket.
From CBS Washington, Face the Nation, a spontaneous and unrehearsed news interview with Senator Thomas Eagleton of Missouri, the Democratic Party candidate for vice president. Senator Eagleton will be questioned by CBS News correspondent Barry Serafin, syndicated columnist Jack Anderson, and CBS News correspondent George Herman. We shall continue the interview in a moment.
The Subaru GL Coupe, powered by its front wheels. The same wheels that drive the car, steer it. Front-wheel drive. It gives the Subaru GL Coupe stability, balance, maneuverability. You'll simply have to test drive it to appreciate it. The new Subaru GL Coupe. For people who know all about imports. For people who never considered one.
Senator, you sound very decisive and very confident. Your meeting with Senator McGovern on this subject is supposed to happen tomorrow. Are you sure now that that meeting will result in a decision that you shall stay on the ticket?
Well, I'll not try to crystal ball what will be the ultimate outcome of Monday night's meeting. Your question was, did I intend to stay on the ticket? The answer to that is yes, and I said it because I think I'd be an asset to the ticket. Be glad to try to explain why if you desire. I've been very thrilled by the reception that I've received on this brief but interesting trip made last week. As you know, we started Tuesday in South Dakota, where I made my announcement with respect to my past health problems. We went on to Los Angeles, Honolulu, San Francisco, and ended up late last night in Jefferson City, Missouri. And without boring you with too much detail, I can say very confidently that the reception I received in all of those locales was warm, cordial, supportive of my candidacy. And these were, by and large, except for Jefferson City last night, total strangers to me, people who'd probably never heard of Eagleton until early that week. And yet they were encouraging me to stay on and say, hang in there, kid, and we're for you, fella, and all that, you know, and I was genuinely pleased, genuinely thrilled.
Well, Senator, I've got an apology that I want to make to you, to your face, and in front of the nation. But before I do, I'd like to follow up on George's question. I've talked to people very high in the McGovern camp, and I mean at the very top levels. And they have told me that George McGovern had told them, or at least had indicated to them, that his hope was that you would voluntarily retire, that he didn't want to pressure you to do so. They themselves felt that you should withdraw from the ticket, but they thought the initiative should come from you. Were you aware of this, and what's your response to it?
Well, I'm aware, Mr. Anderson, by reading through the press, that there is some, what shall we call it, dissension in the McGovern ranks. There's some disagreement over whether I should continue as a candidate or not. The only thing I can testify to that's direct are my conversations with Senator McGovern himself. We had a conversation almost every day of last week, and one day I think we talked twice on the phone. On each of those occasions, he has indicated that he is standing with me, standing by me, whatever the phraseology might be, supporting me, and urging me to continue as the vice presidential candidate. I take his word at face value, and of course we'll know more about the decision-making process tomorrow night when Senator McGovern and I will meet eyeball to eyeball for the first time since our meeting in South Dakota last Tuesday.
Senator, you began the week by saying if George McGovern decided that you would be a liability to the ticket, you would get off. But through the week, you've sounded more and more determined to stay on, and particularly last night. You were asked, are you staying in? You said yes, and you were asked, no matter what happens Monday, and you said, I'm staying in.
Well, it's my firm intention, Mr. Serafin, to stay in the race. I'm going to meet with Senator McGovern tomorrow night, and I'm going to make my case to him, which I think is a case that is a good case. That is that I think my candidacy meets with a favorable response in the most important area of the world, insofar as an election is concerned, the people. I don't live in a house of self-delusion. I'm a pretty pragmatic politician, and I can pretty well tell the response of people. I've given some speeches that have met with rampant silence, and I've given some speeches that had dutiful applause, like this. But the meetings I had, and you were covering most of this swing with me through the West, and the meetings I had were as genuine in terms of the response, intense in terms of the response, as I've ever seen in my 16 years in politics. I don't think I'm deceiving myself. I think that's what I detected from the audiences. Those are the people.
Some of the polls, Senator, show opposition. Opposition from which is certainly in the minority, but definitely opposition. Doesn't this opposition hurt the ticket? And didn't you once say that if you hurt the ticket, that you would withdraw?
I think the polls, Mr. Anderson, basically shows favorable support for Eagleton. I'm talking about the Gallup
there is some
poll
opposition.
and the ones begins with an S, and there anyway. There are three and the Kansas City Star poll, and there are 3 or 4 polls that have shown a substantial percentage favoring Eagleton. Let's suppose that I hadn't made my announcement on Tuesday, and let's suppose a poll was done on this unknown fella, Tom Who, and so the poll was done. Is the ticket strengthened by Tom Who or weakened by Tom Who? I imagine about 50% of the people might have said it's strengthened. 25, well, that's too high. About 20% would have found it strengthened, 20% would have found it hurt, and 60% would have said, who the heck is he?
But politics is, especially an election, is numbers, and the question is, are those in favor of Tom Eagleton after the announcement of Tuesday as opposed to those against him? Does it come out to a net plus or a net minus? Because, as you very well know, in a close election, as this might possibly turn out to be, 2, 3, 4 percentage points could make the total difference. Are you convinced that you do not detract 1, 2, or 3 percentage points from the ticket?
No, I'm convinced of exactly the opposite, that I'll add 1, 2, 3, or 4 percentage points to the ticket. And let me elaborate on just a bit further. I'm not going to try to filibuster the show, but
No, go ahead.
I have to try to explain my answers. I was put on the ticket, I presume, for several reasons. 1, geography. 2, perhaps my religion. 3, my age, being, I guess, relatively young at 42. 4th, and I think perhaps most important of all, I was to serve as some kind of a liaison between the new politics of George McGovern and the old-fashioned politics, if we want to call it that. I've sort of grown up in politics under both auras, so to speak. Now, my contacts in California with respect to individuals who had supported either Humphrey or Muskie or Jackson, etc., were excellent. Met with Mr. Gene Wyman, for instance, in Los Angeles, who was one of the most affluent Humphrey backers and has the ability to raise a large amount of money for his candidates. Mr. Wyman was very forthcoming with respect to me, very cordial, and gave me every indication he wanted to help the McGovern-Eagleton ticket. Later, when I came back from Honolulu, for example, we met with Mayor Alioto in San Francisco. Up till now, he hasn't been enchanted by the McGovern-Eagleton ticket, but he became enchanted that day and endorsed the McGovern-Eagleton ticket. The same way with respect to the politicians that I met in Honolulu. I think these are pluses, because George McGovern knows, as I know, to win this election in November against an incumbent president of the United States, which is a difficult undertaking. We both realize that. To win it, we have to have the full-fledged support of all of the various elements of the Democratic Party. Not just one faction, not just one wing, but all. If we only have a part of the Democratic Party, we can't achieve a victory in November.
Senator, I'd like to follow up on my question of a few minutes ago. When
Sure.
you said you're staying in no matter what happens Monday, does that mean you believe you have the party and public support, that you're confident enough in that you're going to stay in no matter what George McGovern
Well, I don't want to quibble about semantics. I said I'm staying in the race, but of course I expect to go to the meeting with George McGovern and in a free position to discuss and talk. I'm not going there in a pig-headed, adamant way that says, well, whatever you say, Senator, I'm just going to plug my ears and not hear a thing that you say. The purpose of the meeting, the purpose of any intelligent meeting between two mature individuals is to have a free exchange of ideas. I've got several ideas that I want to propound to him, and I'd like to hear from him some comments that he may have. Perhaps he's gathered some from his staff. Thus far, as I said to, I think, Mr. Anderson in his question, every time I've talked to George McGovern, he said, I'm with you, I'm behind you, I'm with you, I want you to continue on the ticket, words such as that. So I have no reason to think he's changed his mind on that
If he said something different tomorrow night or some other night.
Well, I'd have to weigh it.
Well,
Would you accept it?
Well, I'd have to weigh it. I won't say now what I'll accept in terms of what the words might be, but I think I'm a relatively responsible person, and thus, if I'm talking to the Democratic nominee for President of the United States, certainly I'll listen respectfully and attentively to what it is, and I'll weigh his words.
But you're saying...
But I won't, in advance, prejudge what the result will be or say what my predetermined irrevocable position will be.
You're saying, as I understand it, that the decision is yours to make, not Senator McGovern's.
It's a joint decision. When it comes right down to the practicalities of it, it's a joint decision in which the this is a partnership.
Right.
The presidency and the vice presidency has to be a partnership, and thus the decision that will be made Monday night will be a joint decision in which I hope both of us agree.
If George McGovern is negative but says the decision is up to you, would you then make the decision to withdraw?
Mr. Anderson, I can't prejudge what I would do in that event Monday night. I think that I'd perhaps want more time to think it over, not wasteful time. I'm not trying to be dilatory. The campaign is on, although we're not so far into it that we're in the hectic days of September and October, to be sure. Go ahead.
Is it possible in these polls, Senator? We know that Republicans crossed over in some primaries and voted for the candidate that they would most like to defeat.
Right.
Is it possible in these polls that some of the respondents have been Republicans who have said, yes, we want McGovern to stay, we want Eagleton to stay on the ticket, and that these were Republicans who wanted you on the ticket because they thought the ticket would be more vulnerable?
Well, there's probably some Republicans who voted to get Eagleton off the ticket because they thought he'd be an asset to the ticket, and let's get rid of this young, energetic fellow who likes to get into a good fight, and we've been in a good fight this week. This hasn't been the happiest week of my life, nor, must I say, it hasn't been the unhappiest. It's been one of the most exciting, I can assure you that.
Some of the battles have more or less evaporated. I remember that you said, I guess it was in Honolulu, that because of Mr. Anderson's statements about alcoholism, that you were doubly determined to stay in the fight. Now that he has retracted them and has apologized, and I presume will apologize again, are you now only singly determined to stay in?
No, I'm like double spearmint gum. I stay doubled.
Well,
and I did say after Mr. Anderson made his radio broadcast last Wednesday or Thursday, whenever it was, that made me doubly determined to stay in the race. I did say that, and I mean it.
I think probably this is the occasion that I ought to take to face you. This is the first time we've had a chance to face, though I did place calls both at your office and in Los Angeles 24 hours before we used the story.
I'm sorry we didn't get the notes on it, Mr. Anderson, but I'll take your word for it.
Of course, we place calls, and there's a record of the calls, but this is the first time I've had a chance to face you, and I do owe you an apology. I've always told my reporters, Senator, that a fact doesn't become a fact for our column until we can prove it. Now, I violated my own rule, and I want the nation and you to know that I violated it. A trooper, a former, not a present, but a former trooper in Missouri, told me that the troopers there keep copies of all tickets that they handed out, and that a batch of these tickets were given to, photostats of several tickets were given to 3 different people. True Davis has now authorized me to say that he was one of them. The other 2 have not. I talked to True. I called up True Davis and asked him whether he had seen these photostats. True Davis is a supporter of yours. He's a Democrat. His son, I think, worked on your staff. And so I had every reason to take him seriously as a source. He said he had seen photostats of these tickets. The other source said that he was aware of them but had not seen them. The third source I have not been able to reach in all this time. He's out of pocket. But someone close to him says he still has copies of these tickets. I did not verify, I did not authenticate whether or not these tickets were genuine. Using these sources, I went ahead with a story that I should not have gone ahead with, and that was unfair to you, and you have my apology.
Well, let me say, Mr. Anderson, the true test of moral character is, I guess, to admit when one makes a mistake. I'm not going to sit in moral judgment on you, and you, in turn, I guess, won't sit in moral judgment on me, but it takes quite a man to get on a nationwide television network to say he'd made a mistake. I commend you for your courage. This did hurt me, of course. It hurt me not only politically, but a charge like that hurts your family. I've never been arrested or charged or anything to do with drunken driving. I can assure you that, Mr. Anderson. You can continue trying to get your photostats. That's your job. That's what a good reporter ought to do. But I can tell you, with all the candor that I can summon, and on any number of Bibles that we could put on this table, I've never been arrested for drunken driving, charged with it, issued a summons for it, or in any way, shape, or form. And since this issue has been raised in other contexts, I'm not blaming you, but the question of Eagleton's alcoholism, allegedly, I want to make it clear to this vast television audience, I have never had a drinking problem. I've never been treated for having a drinking problem. I've never been even remotely connected with anything to do with a drinking problem. I like to put that issue to rest because rumors, as I've said in my little speech out there in South Dakota, have tended to follow me in my political campaign. And where some of this started, I might add, was when I did go into Mayos on one of those vacations, which I've already... vacations, on one of those occasions that I've already identified, the rumor got around that, well, Eagleton was sent in there to dry out. And the rumor sort of grew and grew and grew. It was false. It was not the case. But anyway, I like to set the record straight.
How do you characterize your drinking? Do you drink at all? Are you a social drinker?
I'm what's called a social drinker.
Does that mean drink?
I might have a cocktail before dinner on a night. That might be one night a week. Might have 2 cocktails before dinner on Saturday night. I'm not a swigger, guzzler, closet drinker, or any other adjective that goes with drinking. A social drinker, I guess, has some common acceptance, but I guess everybody in this room might follow that.
Well, now, people who are under a lot of tension, like you, frequently in this city and in other cities, resort to something, a drink now and then, or a tranquilizer, or a sleeping pill. What do you do to combat the tension, the stress?
Well, I said in answer to a question, I forget in what city, did I ever take a tranquilizer? I said yes, occasionally. The last time I had one was 3 or 4 weeks. This week would have been a good one to take one, I think, but I didn't have any to take.
Now, the additional stress that you've been under, this has not resulted, you haven't taken any tranquilizers?
No. Or sleeping pills? No.
Have you recalled since, although it's one of those details, we might as well get everything out on the table, have you recalled since that statement the name of the tranquilizer?
No, I haven't, and I'm not ducking you. I said it was a blue pill, but I didn't look at the pill thing to see what the name is. I don't remember names.
Okay.
Well, Senator, I would like nothing better than to dispose of this issue right here and now, and I wish that I could retract completely the story and say there's nothing to it.
Well,
I cannot, in good conscience, do that.
Well, you can't.
I apologize to you for publishing a premature story. I apologize for publicizing documents that I have not seen and have not verified. And in this age of Howard Hughes hoaxes, I'm now acutely conscious of the fact that these documents may be forgeries. But there's no question that True Davis saw these citations, and there's no question I've gotten from the state trooper a number of specific allegations, which I'd like to go over with you in private, because I think that I've already done you a disservice by airing them in public. And I would like to be able, I wish that I could now retract the story completely. I cannot do that yet. My conscience won't allow me to, but I would like your cooperation so that I can.
I'm willing to cooperate, but I don't quite get the apology and then the no retraction business. I take it you're saying the story should not have been aired in the first place.
Absolutely.
Because you didn't see the identifiable data that would support such a story.
I should never have used it.
And yet you still have the lingering notion exists. And as I read the account of Mr. Davis in the morning papers, he wasn't absolutely certain what he saw, whether they were purportedly facsimiles of things or reproductions or what. I'll make my record clear, and in due course I hope you'll exhaust your remedies and make yours equally clear. I've never been stopped, arrested, cited, or anything connected with drunken driving. Never, no time, no how. And I'll stand behind that because that happens to be God's truth. And I hope in due course, after you've exhausted your various remedies, that you'll issue what is called a retraction.
Let me just say that a former trooper, and I've now talked, this was before I used the story, I talked to the former trooper. I've now talked to 2 or 3 of them, and they have given me specific incidents which I would like to go over with you. In addition, the St. Louis Post-Dispatch has quoted a former Missouri highway official as saying that he personally stopped you 3 times.
Nothing to do with drunken driving. That was never mentioned in the Post-Dispatch
article. Other troopers had. Oh, well, no. I would like to exhaust these. I really would prefer to retract everything right here, but I cannot retract a story that still hasn't been pursued to its final end. And I'm going to pursue that with your help, and I hope I can give a full retraction.
I'll be glad to. I'm sorry we didn't get your phone calls. I take at face value you tried to reach us. You say you did, I'll take your word on that. I think the story has been so thoroughly discredited that it leaves me in a puzzlement as to why you can't retract a story that you say you shouldn't have promulgated in the first place. That doesn't seem to be quite equitable to me.
Do you have any knowledge of, or have you heard anything at all about forged documents of this kind being circulated? Do you have
I don't know anything about forged documents. Or the only record I have seen was a photostat in a newspaper article of the record that Colonel Mike Hockaday, head of the Missouri State Highway Patrol, I think gave to the press, or anyway, got reproduced in the paper. I did go through a radar thing in 19, I don't know, as Attorney General of Missouri, 62 or 3. I paid a fine of $35 and $11 costs in Fulton, Missouri. Then the only other item, I was on some ice on an icy snowstorm day, driving from St. Louis to Jefferson City. And if you've ever been in a car in an icy snowstorm, it sometimes just starts to slide. It's the eeriest feeling you can have. It slid, and the left front fender hit what I call a horse, like a lumber sawhorse, and dented the fender. And those are the two on that record. Then the St. Louis Police Department, I paid a $5 fine when I was 18 years of age, back 24 years ago, and a $10 fine when I was 20-some other years of age. Now, that's the Eagleton criminal record, which I find neither criminal nor really does it
well, while
we're
pulling out all the details,
sure.
Is there anything else? As you must know by now, there's a horde of reporters tracking down with a microscope everything that you have ever done everywhere along your life. Is there anything else that you could think of that is likely to come out under this searching examination that can cause you trouble?
I haven't robbed any banks quite recently. And I've given up pickpocketing for a living.
No, I don't mean it as a joke, because you must know that you're under a very searching scrutiny.
I'm sure that many people are trying to look into my life. That's part of politics. I understand that. No, I know of no skeleton that's in any closet in any way, shape, or form connected with me. And since I used the word skeleton, would you mind if I clarified how I answered the question to Senator McGovern and to Frank Mankiewicz?
That was my next question to you. Senator McGovern asked you, supposedly, was there anything in your background that could cause trouble?
Let me precisely tell you what happened. And on this, I'm very, very accurate, because I've reduced this to notes so that I would keep it accurate. The Thursday of the convention. Remember, on Wednesday night, George McGovern had been nominated in the wee hours of the morning. Thursday was the vice presidential night. From about 10 a.m. on that day, I remained in my suite with 4 or 5 of our staff guys, what we called the vigil, hoping for the telephone call. Frankly, by the time 2 o'clock rolled around, no call. We were about to throw in the towel. We'd been passed by. When, lo and behold, we decided to sweat it out a little longer. The call comes at 20 minutes to 4, and here's how the call took place. By that time, I'd gone into the adjacent bedroom, and I was reading a magazine. One of my staff guys came in and said, "George McGovern's on the line," just in a hushed voice. So I came out the room, and all the guys are sitting there. My wife is sitting there, stony silence. I say, "Hello, Tom, George McGovern. I'd like you to be my running mate on this ticket here in 72. I said, paused for a few days. "George, I'm flabbergasted." He said, "Well, no, we've thought it over, and I'd like you to be my running mate on this ticket." And I said, "Well, George, before you change your mind, I'll hasten to accept." He said, "Fine." He said, "I'll turn you over to Frank Mankiewicz for some details." Frank got on, gave me some very nice compliments, and gee, by that time, the guys in the room were applauding, and so on and so forth. They could hear my end of the line, and it was some excitement. And he said, "Now you got to get going on your acceptance speech and talk to our staff so the two speeches coincide. You know, you're not talking down one alley and he's talking down another." Then he asked this question. He said, "Tom, do you have any skeletons rattling around in your closet?" Now that's the sentence. Is the key sentence as far as I'm concerned. I'm not trying to make a case as a Philadelphia lawyer or as a nitpicking semanticist. I answered that question cogently, directly, and the word is no. And that's the word I used. If that question were asked of me today, that same question, the word is no, because I did not consider the fact that I had some hospitalization for a health problem to be a skeleton. What's a skeleton to Eagleton? A skeleton is something that's dirty, filthy, corrupt, illegal, sinister. There's nothing about being fatigued and exhausted and being in a state of mild depression that I find sinister, dirty, or ugly. Maybe that isn't the happiest facet of my life, the fact that I've had some medical treatment. But I at least had the courage to seek out medical treatment, the best that was available, and try to do better. But I don't call that part of my life sinister, ugly, or filthy. Had anybody asked me, did I ever have a medical problem or what have you, I would have given them a direct categorical answer. And the truth is, on the floor of the convention on Wednesday night, I don't know, George, if you were on the floor then, but anyway, rumors were going around about Eagleton having some kind of a health problem. That is, the McGovern forces were on notice of that rumor.
Well, I understand, Senator, that you had talked this over with your wife. When did that incident
I
take
said
place?
coming down on the plane, she corrected me. We talked it over perhaps Tuesday or Wednesday, Mr. Anderson, in this very slight regard. That's when my name was being more prominently mentioned. Probably it was more likely Wednesday, because that's the day it was being the most prominently mentioned. But my wife said, well, you realize, won't you, that they'll probably dig out the health problem. I said, I understand that. I said, you know, I accept that as a pragmatic, practical fact of life.
But having talked it over with her, you didn't think that it was really necessary to talk it over with George McGovern?
Yeah, well, I didn't think it was necessary to talk it over in terms of the question that was being asked. If they'd asked him, said, have you got any kind of a health problem or what have you, I would have candidly answered. I wasn't going to lie to McGovern or to Mankiewicz. But when he said skeleton, as God is my judge, what went through my mind, and I gave him a pretty quick answer, is anything, you know, that's culpable, on which blame can be assessed for doing something that's illegal, filthy, or dirty.
Senator, this is a television program, and everybody watching you can see that you're perspiring considerably and that your hands have a slight shake to them.
Well, I was gesturing.
Like many guests whom we've had on this program under the spotlight. Now, I'd like your comment, because people in this context are going to look at your perspiration and your slight tremor, and they're going to say, what's with him?
Well, the lights in the studio are less than cool, and they focus in. I'm the guy getting the third degree with the lights. No, but I feel very comfortable and very relaxed. In fact, I'd like to go on for another half hour if we could.
Senator, do you think you're now demonstrating your answer to people who wonder how you operate under stress?
I think, Mr. Seraphin, these last 5 days have been about as much stress as one could be under, one being a politician. I'm sure a surgeon, when he's performing a delicate brain operation, has a great deal of stress, but I've weathered this week very well. And I think it's been a successful week for Tom Eagleton in any event, because he's his own man.
Thank you very much, Senator Eagleton, for being with us today on Face the Nation.
Thank you.
And they're displaying their interest by sponsoring certain black colleges to train black professionals. Yes?
Excuse me, Dr. Stab, but they're ready with your call to Nanette Fabre now.
Okay, thank you, Jack. Hi, Nanette.
Hi, Vern. What can I do for you?
We need your assistance in recruiting minority students in the profession of speech pathology and audiology. The Chicanos, the blacks, the Orientals, and the American Indians.
Well, you know I'll be glad to help, but how?
Well, now, we want them to write to you in care of the national office, requesting information about the profession. And, by the way, in responding to them, would you tell them that there are unlimited opportunities for them in the profession?
Well, you know I'll be glad to help.
Thank you so much. And once again, you've come through for the speech and hearing handicapped.
Goodbye, Vern. Please write to me in care of Hearing and Speech, Washington, D.C.
Today on Face the Nation, Senator Thomas Eagleton of Missouri, the Democratic Party candidate for vice president, was questioned by CBS News correspondent Barry Seraphin, syndicated columnist Jack Anderson, and CBS News correspondent George Herman. Next week, another prominent figure in the news will face the nation. United States and Russian junior international track and field stars highlight the AAU International Championships today at 3, 2 Central Time. Face the Nation originated from CBS, Washington. John Hart is anchorman when Campaign 72 examines all aspects of the Eagleton controversy today at 6, 5 Central Time on CBS.